Fox News alert, you are looking live at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the U.S. stock market surging to new records. You are looking at 19,954 on the Dow. The big number to watch, 20,000. We've never been there before. The Dow's up 21 points right now. We're going to keep our eye on it because this might be the day it breaks through there. You're looking at multiple record closes for the Dow since Donald Trump was elected president. Will that Trump rally continue all the way into the end of the year? We shall see. 20,000. We're watching it. Another Fox News alert for you. Tensions mounting as America's strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, says it has evidence the Obama administration was behind a UN resolution condemning its settlement activity. This after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu slamming the U.S. refusal to veto the resolution as, quote, a shameful anti-Israel ambush. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, here today, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy. Also from FBN, Dagan McDowell is here. News editor for townhall.com, Katie Pavlich. And today's hashtag one lucky guy, Iraq and Afghanistan veteran and Fox News contributor Pete Hegseth. And he is outnumbered, and we will always remind you of that, sir.
I always feel outnumbered. Surrounded, it's an ambush.
And I will always call you hunka burning Hegseth.
Oh, wow. Wow. All right. We're starting out on that note.
Now I made you blush.
Yes.
We can move on.
All right, good to have you. Let's get started. The intensifying standoff between the U.S. and Israel after the UN Security Council's vote condemning Israeli settlements as a violation of international law. The U.S., which has veto power in the Security Council, abstained from Friday's vote, breaking with long-standing American policy to shield Israel from UN condemnation. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, saying they have evidence the Obama administration was behind this.
We have that evidence, and as I said earlier, we're going to present it to the new administration, and if they choose to share it with the American people, that'll be their choice. And it's very clear that the U.S. orchestrated that. And look, had they even said up front, this is our policy and this is what we want to do, we would be in the same place, because ultimately we have to deal with a resolution that's on the table and its long-term consequences.
But Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes firing back in an interview with Israeli television.
It's not an ambush when President Obama and Secretary Kerry have been saying in hundreds of conversations and in public comments that Israeli settlement activity was pushing into the West Bank in a way that was making the two-state solution unachievable. When we see laws that aim to legalize outposts, when we see rhetoric that suggests that this is the most pro-settlement Israeli government in history, we feel compelled to speak up against those actions.
Meantime, the issue quickly becoming a tug-of-war between the outgoing and incoming administrations. President-elect Donald Trump highly critical of the Security Council resolution and the U.S. abstention, tweeting, quote, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. John Huddy joins us live from Jerusalem. John?
Well, Sandra, adding to what Ambassador Dermer said, a senior Israeli official told me today that he had seen, and these are his words, sensitive material and information proving without a doubt that the Obama administration in the U.S. was directly behind this resolution, that orchestrated the resolution and pushed it to a vote on Friday. But again, as with Ambassador Dermer and then this official, I haven't seen any specifics. No specifics were given. So hopefully maybe we'll get more on that. I'm waiting for more information. That said, though, this remains really the position of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here in Israel, that the U.S., that the Obama administration was behind this, who over the weekend, you talked about this in the intro, Sandra, called the resolution shameful and an ambush by the U.S., and that Israel, he said, would hold its ground when it comes to Israel's settlement policies. The Prime Minister also adding this. Listen.
As I told John Kerry on Thursday, friends don't take friends to the Security Council. I'm encouraged by the statements of our friends in the United States, Republicans and Democrats alike. They understand how reckless and destructive this UN resolution was. I look forward to working with those friends and with the new administration when it takes office next month.
Now, beyond the political rhetoric, there's already been actual political fallout as far as what the administration here and what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing. He recalled Israel's 10 ambassadors to the 10 countries that voted in favor of this resolution. He also said that Israel will reassess its ties with the United Nations. Now, Israel, at this point, in the short term, is unlikely to change its settlement policies. In fact, it's moving forward with construction of settlements in the West Bank that were slated for construction, however, even before this resolution was passed. But there remains concern, Sandra, that if Israel doesn't tread lightly, that there could be another resolution before President Obama leaves office that is more binding than the one voted on Friday. And here in Israel, as you can imagine, this has been the talk on the street, in coffee shops, restaurants. People disappointed about this, but not exactly surprised given the history between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama.
John Huddy, thank you for that report. Yeah, I spoke to Governor Huckabee this morning. He's on his way there, and he indicated that he expects to hear the same sentiment there. That being said, who's to blame for this, Pete? Because, you know, Trump's using this as an opportunity to say, hey, January 20th, things are going to be a lot different.
Barack Obama. You listen to Ben Rhodes and what he said in that clip that we played up front. He's making a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli argument. I was in Israel recently. If you understand the settlements in Judea and Samaria, which others call the West Bank, you understand it's not this evil aspect that people lay it out to be. The two-state solution is dead. It has been for a long time. And if Donald Trump sticks to his pledge to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it would be something we've been saying we're going to do for a long time, an indication that we're committed to the state of Israel. What Barack Obama did at the end of the day was what he's wanted to do for a long time, which is give in to the international left and the UN, which has become a bludgeon against the U.S. and Israel. That's exactly what this was, and by abstaining, they were voting for it.
And speaking of that, Kennedy, this is what Trump tweeted about the United Nations specifically, saying the UN has such great potential, but right now it is just a club for people to get together, talk, and have a good time. So sad.
Yeah, it's like Oprah's book club or a country club. Unfortunately, this
about as effectual, yes.
Yeah, but this is much more serious.
And fund it with $3 billion every year.
Yeah, and a lot of it our money. And here's what the president has done. And we saw this recently with some of the oil drilling executive order mandates, and also with Obamacare, is he makes things so incredibly complex that they're difficult to undo. And the Security Council vote came to be before he leaves office, just so they would have that unanimous vote against Israel. And the United States abstained much in the same way that then Senator and State Senator Barack Obama did, because, as you remember, many of his votes were neither yay or nay.
It's a chicken way to do it.
That's absolutely right. It's very passive-aggressive. It's very complex, and he knows the vote cannot be undone. It also gives Donald Trump, and I'm surprised that the president was so myopic on this, it gives Donald Trump a perfect opportunity to dive off of one of his campaign platforms into the welcome and loving cup of Israel.
Katie.
Yeah, he should. I mean, this is now a launching pad for Donald Trump to do exactly what he said he would do on the campaign trail. Move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You know, the White House is now denying that they had anything to do with making sure that this UN resolution passed, or the abstention. But they also denied sending Obama operatives to campaign against Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, and it came out later that they actually did do that. So I'm not so convinced that the White House is telling the truth about not actually making sure that this resolution passed, and it is amazing to me that we still take the UN seriously. I would disagree with Donald Trump when he says it has potential. What have they done over the past 30 years to prevent genocide? On the Israeli border, there is a genocide happening, 500,000 people dead. There is a genocide of Christians happening just down the road in Iraq, and the UN has done nothing to prevent that, and yet they're condemning the only democracy and the only safe place in the Middle East.
What we can do is withhold our assessed contributions to the UN. It's about a quarter of the general operating budget and peacekeeping budget at the United Nations.
Yes.
It's $3 billion. John Bolton thinks that we should do that to start with. But Bret Stephens in the Wall Street Journal, to your point, has a searing, scathing editorial that this is not just about Israel. This is about the deception of the Obama administration and the horror that it's wrought, quite frankly, across the world in terms of what's going on in Iraq or Afghanistan and Iran. And just to paraphrase, the administration was deceptive about the motives of the 2012 Benghazi attack. It was deceptive about Bo Bergdahl's record to release those Taliban leaders. It was deceptive when it came to nuclear negotiations with Iran, ultimately what was in the deal and what the end game with that nuclear deal is. It's deception across the board. Why would this be any different?
Of course it's deception. You're exactly right, from the White House. And Ron Dermer, who's the ambassador to the U.S. from Israel, is Bibi Netanyahu's guy. If he's speaking and saying that's evidence, he's speaking for Bibi Netanyahu. I guarantee you they have it. And how ironic is it that we're not going to give it to Obama. We're going to give it to the president-elect and let him decide what he wants to do with it. Because this resolution isn't just about settlements in Judea and Samaria.
Right.
This is about the Western Wall. This is about, the Temple Mount.
Yeah,
and whether or not that's
sacred
occupied territory. They've condemned the Western Wall as occupied Palestinian territory, along with the Jewish quarter in East Jerusalem. I mean, this is about the ability for the international community to condemn Israel for decades to come, which is how they will try to use this in the
Okay, what does Trump do going forward?
Well, I think he does everything he can to clarify absolutely what U.S. policy is. And you do that by moving the embassy.
Right.
You do that by, and Intifada Part 3 could come as a result of that. Then you stand by Israel and let them do what they need to do to beat it back. You show that you're a real friend in critical times.
Well, I think that, speaking of real friends, the Obama administration has made it clearer than ever whose side they're on. With the Iranian deal giving them billions of dollars, millions of dollars in cash, guess where that money's going? To Hezbollah, to attack Israel. They're directly funding terrorism against Israel by participating in that ransom payment. Deception again. I mean,
about it.
And the idea that we're supposed to work with the Palestinian government when Hamas still has a huge role in deciding what the policy is there. They're a terrorist organization. And the Obama administration is choosing that side of it rather than choosing the side of the Israelis by condemning all of these parts of this resolution.
Yeah, but how do you turn a blind eye to that? That's the thing that I don't understand. And, people may have fundamental differences, and a lot of libertarians do. They don't think that we should be investing as much money in Israel as we are. But you look at the only, as you said, the only democracy in the Middle East surrounded by terrorists who want nothing more than to eradicate them in the most violent and ongoing way possible. But how do you turn a blind eye? Let's just take Hamas alone. How does the president rationalize that? That's something I don't understand.
It does shine a light on the growing, rising, frightening anti-Semitism among some on the left. And you see it on college campuses across this country, and you see it front and center across Europe, and nobody will talk about it except conservatives.
That's exactly right. And it's not because it's not a blind eye. It's anti-Western. It's the view of the world that it's colonialism, that it's white. All these things we're hearing on college campuses, that's where Barack Obama came from. That's what he believes. He's finally unleashed to do it because he's not accountable. And I think we're going to see even more of it.
And one thing I would add is I think that this is a preview of the post-Barack Obama, after he's out of the White House, what his pet projects are going to be. And I guarantee you there will be much more of this when he doesn't have the White House around him.
By the way, I just wanted to get this in before we finish this particular segment. Benjamin Netanyahu just tweeting out, the nations of the world respect strong countries that stand up for themselves and do not respect weak countries that bow their heads. I imagine he's referring to you-know-who as the weak countries. All right, that's the very latest on that. Thank you, everyone. All right, President Obama claiming if he could have run for a third term, he would have beaten President-elect Donald Trump. Mr. Trump says, no way, we will debate. And there could be a new party of no in town. Democrats gearing up for their turn as the opposition party, whether it's going to slow down President-elect Trump's ability to govern. And after the show, remember, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. We're always there. And of course, you can tweet us. We look at those tweets during the show. Pete's picking up the phone right now. Ask us questions. Tell us you like his suit. We're going to see you there.
Welcome back to Outnumbered. Isn't it glorious? Yes. President Obama leaves the White House in just over 3 weeks. But before he goes, he's triggering a bit of a war of words with his successor, claiming he would have won a third term if it hadn't been for the pesky 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, and he could run again, and that voters still relate to his message of hope and change.
I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it. I know that in conversations that I've had with people around the country, even some people who disagreed with me, they would say the vision, the direction that you point towards is the right one.
Okay. President-elect Donald Trump firing back in a tweet saying President Obama said he thinks he would have won against me. He should say that, but I say no way. Jobs leaving, ISIS, care, etc. Pete, I would argue it's not even the jobs leaving. It's the jobs people don't have that they desperately want. And
Sure.
It's the climate and the economy that the president has set up.
Yeah.
But, man, very, very little self-awareness with this outgoing president.
Well, a great deal of self-awareness. Also, a clear shot at Hillary Clinton, who, ran effectively on his agenda, ran on his third term. I mean, that's the case. He's basically saying, if I could have made this argument, it would have been better. And it's actually hard to argue with that. She's such a terrible candidate that if they ran on the same issues and he was the candidate, he probably would have performed better. I don't think he would have beat of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I love that he says in the tweet, and he should say that, right? He recognizes that someone should be confident and think they could win a third term.
Yeah.
But I think this was a year for Donald Trump. He spoke to it. He tapped into it. And ultimately, if there is an economic message to be had, it's that your job isn't here anymore and I'm going to bring it back, or the type of job you have is not the type you deserve. And Trump's going to win that argument.
All right, so if he had the big secret, which no one had the combo to the padlock to beat Donald Trump. Not a field of 16 Republicans, not Bernie Sanders, certainly not Hillary Clinton. So if President Obama had the key, if he had the secret to success and victory over Donald Trump, why didn't he share it with Hillary Clinton?
I cannot believe that after this year, where I'm asking, you're asking me to do another prediction on who would have won or lost the election. But I don't know. I mean, you look at the numbers and you look at the coalition, and the fact is that the Obama coalition did not turn out for Hillary Clinton, despite his efforts to get them out. Donald Trump was able to flip 200 plus counties that Barack Obama won in 2012. Now, would Obama have been able to hold on to all of those? I doubt it, but Barack Obama is a different candidate than Hillary Clinton is. He's more relatable to some people. But going back to his economic message, I don't think that people really would have wanted a third term with Obama just based on how people were feeling, especially since at the end of the campaign, I really think that it wasn't the FBI that did Hillary Clinton in. It was the Obamacare premiums coming to fruition and people going, how am I going to afford this?
Where they went up by 160%.
Exactly.
And Kellyanne Conway knew that very early on. I talked to her off camera months before those premium increases came out. And she said, just wait, we're going to run ads in all these areas across the country. But what President Obama is essentially saying is, hey, I had under me worst recovery since 1949, lowest labor participation since the mid to late 70s, but I've got better smoke and mirrors than Hillary Clinton does. I'm better at hoodwinkery, if you will. And by the way, he just punched her in the face with this comment. Why isn't that sexist? I'm waiting.
Whoa! You pulling that card?
At every turn, it was always her gender. But everyone in this case, because she was, remember, she was the most qualified person for this job.
To run for the presidency. No, but she's absolutely right. And every time, whether it's Joe Biden or the president or a number of pundits and senators who have weighed in, every time they make an assessment, it really is a gut punch to her again. But I argue that this entire election cycle was a reaction to President Obama. Therefore, if it was such a reaction to him, he could not have won again.
No, but I think this is the 4th hour of television I've done with Dagan this morning. Well, actually, it's this afternoon now. Okay,
and
we're here.
We still love each other.
But I kept asking the question, wait, so was that not a real moment in the White House when they got all warm and fuzzy and shook hands and they had the photo op? President Obama Obama and the newly elected Donald Trump. I mean, do you remember that moment? So was that not real? Because they seem so nice and cordial. And now he's like, what?
Politicians have public positions and private positions? Is that what you're telling me?
No. Hey, but listen, I mean, he would have a really hard time bragging about his the job situation that he is leaving after 8 years. He'd probably tout the stock market gains, but not a lot of people were able to benefit from that.
Maxine Waters said that the stock market, the rally in the financial stocks was appalling.
Right.
That the record run in the market initially after President Trump won was appalling, although it was awesome during President Obama.
Yeah, they're willing to take the credit for Wall Street when it's good, but when it's bad, they blame everything else. But one thing I think that's important to point out here is Obama's comments in this interview are just another example of how the left refuses to accept the results and move on. He can't just say, I'm moving out of the White House, I had a great 2 terms, I wish the president-elect well. He has to then issue a parting shot, yes, towards Trump, but also towards Hillary Clinton by saying, well, if I wanted to, a Democrat would still be in the White House. Well, again, Democrats lost, Republicans won, Trump will be the president.
What about the 1,000 Democrats at national and state levels who've lost their seats in 8 years? This is according to the New York Times under President Obama. His coattails are tinsels. Like they've short-sheeted. Yeah, they're negative tails.
Real quick, they're goat tails. Sandra's question, was that civility real or not? I think that what you're seeing is...
I'd like to hope it was. Am I naive?
Clenching his teeth. He had his, night mouth guard to get through that meeting.
A retainer?
But what's going on is that he sees his entire legacy about to get torn up. Whether it's Obamacare, all the labor regulations, all of the ecological EPA regulations, you name it. It's GONE out of here.
Yeah, Dodd-Frank, Obamacare. I mean, the list goes on and on. And he is so shallow. He's even said, this is about preserving my legacy. And that was the plea that he made to voters during the campaign season was, do me a favor and solidify my legacy by voting for the person that I have personally endorsed.
That I actually secretly despise.
Right.
Wouldn't it have been fun to watch Obama debate Trump, though? I mean, if we could have seen that.
That would have been pretty good.
More fun.
I wanted, my dream team, my LeBron versus Jordan, would have been Trump and Sanders.
It would have been a little crazy.
Take Trump v. Biden. That would have been interesting.
That would have been good, too. I think that would have been
Uncle Joe's like,
every day. Every day he's got to know, oh, man. I'm only going to be 85 years old in 2020. Let's do it. Japan's prime minister visiting Pearl Harbor today, an historic moment with President Obama. But should he apologize for the attack that plunged America into World War II? Or is it simply time to move on? Plus, say it ain't no. After blasting Republicans as obstructionists for years, Dems are now preparing early roadblocks for President Trump. So is the shoe about to be on the other foot? Cinderella.
Welcome back to Outnumbered. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is meeting with President Obama today in Hawaii and is becoming the first sitting Japanese Prime Minister to accompany a U.S. president to the USS Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor. He laid a wreath at an American military cemetery there this morning and will visit the USS Arizona Memorial with President Obama later today. But there are questions over whether Prime Minister Abe should apologize for the attack that killed over 2,000 Americans and pulled the U.S. into World War II. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is traveling with the president and is live in Honolulu with more. Hi, Kevin.
Pete, always great to talk to you, my friend. And no, there will not be an apology forthcoming, nor was there one when President Obama visited Hiroshima earlier this year. Today is a day for reflection and obviously reconciliation as the two leaders mark the 75th anniversary of the attacks that propelled the Americans into the Pacific in World War II. We're talking about the USS Arizona, as you pointed out, this memorial, solemn, hallowed ground. If you haven't had a chance to be here, you should really try to take it in. It is something to behold. And obviously that ship was felled, that brutal attack on that fateful morning that cost the lives of so many Americans. It was, after all, December 7th, 1941, as President Roosevelt politically and powerfully said, a date which will live in infamy. It's also a date marked by sacrifice and heroism to go along with the loss of life. Now, this visit by Prime Minister Abe is the back end of an earlier exchange at Hiroshima, as we talked about, when President Obama marked the end of the war and the lingering effects of the first atomic bomb blast to strike that city. Now, for the Japanese Prime Minister, this visit, by the way, Pete, is also more than just about the past. It's truly about the future between these two countries, and that should be a promising future if you ask America's diplomat to Japan.
I think the alliance is so strong and it has so much bipartisan support. I think President Trump, I think that he'll recognize that.
Busy day to include the tour between the two leaders. We're also going to have remarks from them as well later on this afternoon, and we'll be here to share that with our audience. Granted, this is the 75th anniversary, a few weeks after the actual date, but this is also an important reminder for the greatest generation, Pete. I'm sure you can relate to that, and a great many of them, this will be the last major recognition of this event, and we look forward to bringing that to you later today right here on Fox News.
Absolutely.
But for now,
Kevin, thanks for the great report. Certainly a reminder of a generation that we are losing, but that day is seared in their brain, in the consciousness of our country. Kennedy, what do you think? I mean, so much happened 75 years ago. Here we are, a world away from that world war, with a different relationship with Japan. Is this the right thing to do, or should there be an apology?
I think it is the right thing to do, and I think there should be an apology. And, you know, maybe that makes me a bad person, but I'm a patriotic person, and I think what they did was horrific. I think it was a dirty, filthy sneak attack, and I think thousands of people died. They knew exactly what we were doing, and I don't think there's a direct comparison between the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sorry.
So it was a sneak attack, but it was a military attack on a military installation. What's your take?
No, I would say that these asking for apologies surrounding war events, especially that happened 75 years ago, is difficult because it's never going to happen. Obviously, the leaders of whatever country it is made those decisions at the time, thinking that their best interest of the country was in mind. That being said, I agree with Kennedy. What they did was a sneak attack. It got us into World War II. It created a situation where we had to drop an atomic bomb to end the war, which they are responsible in my opinion. And so we're not going to get an apology. I think it's important to emphasize that the relationship now with Japan is different than it was then. It's an ally that we need in that region of the world, and I'm just glad that President Obama didn't apologize when he went over to Japan. I breathed a sigh of relief after that.
But you thought that he might.
I thought that he might, and I'm glad that he did not. And I do think that the White House should apologize to the veterans they called bitter, who actually do have an issue with what's happening today.
Sure, you can understand why. I read a number of articles about World War II vets who were there, who lived with the difficulty of that day and the war that unfolded. Does this speak, Dagan, to America? I mean, here we are 75 years later with a former enemy here, recognizing that, whether people are apologizing or not. And we helped rebuild and reassert that country into the world community.
And now this is an incredibly, critically important relationship that we have, our most important in the Pacific and in Asia. And this relationship between Abe and President-elect Trump is going to need to deepen even further. And we can't, again, worsening relations with China, the continued nuclear threat of North Korea, and there many other developments in other countries, whether you're talking about South Korea or even the Philippines, that are unnerving. You had Abe, he was the first leader to fly to New York, the first foreign leader to meet with Donald Trump. I think that speaks volumes, and what's happening at Pearl Harbor speaks volumes about how close we are today and how we need to continue to be.
Yes, and how important is that relationship? You look at China asserting itself there. I mean,
but I wanted to lean on you a little bit more, because I, like you, read so many of those stories of surviving veterans. Some want an apology, some want him to mourn with them. Because you speak to and represent veterans, and you are one yourself, I mean, what would you like to see happen here?
I think everyone internalizes and deals with stuff like that differently. Some might want an apology adamantly. Others have turned the page. Others think it is great to mourn and honor it. Personally, I'm really glad we didn't apologize in Hiroshima. And I understand why they wouldn't as well, even if I may want that. I mean, I think we do go down a slippery slope when we're apologizing for every action we've taken in war, whether it was a sneaker attack or not.
That was a big one, though.
No, it's a big one, but I would say, listen, they had made a strategic decision, fighting the way they were, allied with Germany, that they were going to attack a military installation that was not properly defended. It was a sneak attack.
What do you make of at least his presence there, then?
Well, no, I think he's doing it respectfully. He's doing it as an ally. He's doing it in a recognition that it was an emperor and an ideology 75 years ago that led the world to war and horrific massacre. And I think they've atoned for that. I think part of this is continuing to atone.
I'm sure that Hitler is not too happy about Pearl Harbor. Because if the United States had not been drawn into the conflict, Western Europe might look very...
Well, no, we were asleep for a long time, and in a very unfortunate way at this moment.
Splendid isolation of our own.
Woke us up. Yeah.
Well, no apology. There could be a new party of no in town after blasting Republicans for years over their blockade of President Obama's agenda. Democrats gearing up for their turn as the opposition party, planning to throw up early roadblocks for President-elect Donald Trump's agenda and cabinet picks. In the past week, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi issuing a call to action to her rank-and-file members to fight GOP efforts to undo Obamacare and overhaul the tax code. She's even planning a so-called day of action the weekend before the inauguration. Meantime, Democrats also signaling a big fight for some of Trump's cabinet picks. Last week, a group of 16 Dems said no committee should vote on a nominee until they've provided a financial report, an ethics agreement, and cleared FBI background checks. Guess who lost? Katie Pavlich.
I think that Democrats are regretting nuking the filibuster under Harry Reid right about now, because they gave away all that power for the sake of their own, and now they don't have much of it left. One thing that I think is important to point out here, especially with Nancy Pelosi's day of action before the inauguration, she and a lot of Democrats like her, the celebrities who are planning a counter concert down in Florida on the same day as the inauguration, are purposely dividing the country. Could you just for 1 week come together as Americans? You might not like the guy. There's a lot of people who don't like him. That's fine. And respect the process and the peaceful transfer of power. And yet here we have Democrats who complained on the campaign trail that Trump might do this. Here again, purposely dividing the country and not coming together for the sake of swearing in the next president of the United States. I find it appalling.
Yeah, I mean, Fox News alert, Nancy Pelosi's a partisan.
Right.
I mean, this is who she's always been, what she's always pursued.
She's not Michael Moore. What is this day of action?
Lord, I mean, two people there.
How I feel about the celebrity concert. Thanks, Nance. What are you going to make another scintillating video to the Hamilton electors? Just
people are waiting for
one
a
last
Pelosi
shot.
video.
Hashtag never Trump. Good Lord! It's if you really want to do something, and I've said this to the left, get people that you are aligned with elected. You know who can't do that? Nancy Pelosi.
Can I quote one Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, Richard Neal, talking about their plans to overhaul the tax code and how this is going to be part of the big party. He says there's going to be opposition if these tax cuts are directed to the people at the top again. He said we're going to be pretty united on this. So you think it was just Obamacare, but no, they're going to go after. Come on, Donald Trump won on his policy on taxes.
I think to your point exactly. I think they're in dangerous ground to look like obstructionists to policy positions that have had broad appeal across their own traditional constituencies, working men and women across states that they previously won. And if they're resistant to the things that Donald Trump said he was going to do for those folks, it's going to keep hurting them. They haven't learned the lesson.
You're right. House Republicans have a tax reform plan. Donald Trump has a tax reform plan. The Democrats don't have a tax reform
It's called
plan.
a raise it.
And by the way,
we
Raise
raised
more,
taxes
spend more.
we raised taxes in the last 8 years.
Yeah.
We ran up the deficit. We re-regulated vast swaths of the economy.
Can I? By the way, can I show you what the people think about Donald Trump's tax plan? Look at the Dow. Look at the Dow about to 20,000.
You know what? If the Democrats get in the way of tax reform and the stock market tanks and people are a little angry about that, I hope that they have to own that.
They've proven that they've learned absolutely nothing. Kennedy mentioned this earlier in the show. They've lost thousands of seats at the state level. Republicans are running the show when it comes to governorships around the country. They lost the House in 2010, the Senate in 2014, the presidency now. They've ignored key constituencies that they used to own. And yet here they are now, stonewalling on economic plans that could benefit both Republicans and Democrats.
Here's what I cannot wait to see, because you know that the Democrats who stonewall Trump tax reform efforts to reform Obamacare, whatever it is, he's going to tweet about them by name to that person's constituents and say, are you happy? Okay, tax reform, I was going to give you more of your money back. You were going to get a pay raise, and your congressman so-and-so is getting in the way of that. How do you feel about it? Because you know
that was going to be more money in your pocket, and Democrats have much to be worried about, because in 2 years they face Senate Democrats face an uphill battle in the election. And if they do things if they don't listen to people and they don't listen to the bottom line that you've spoken about for over a year, Sandra, It's about the bottom line. If people don't have improved economic flexibility, if they don't have more money in their pockets and in their bank accounts, the uprising will continue.
And meantime, Nancy Pelosi can lecture all the Republicans about it's Affordable Care Act. It's not Obamacare. Affordable. Say it with me.
Unaffordable.
On the White House website, it's called Obamacare. Affordable, not affordable.
Meantime, we got to move on to this story. The horrifying gun violence at Chicago taking no holiday over the Christmas weekend. Dozens of people shot, at least 12 dead. What is to blame when the Windy City has some of the toughest gun laws in this country?
A horrifying amount of violence this Christmas weekend in Chicago. The Chicago Tribune reporting 61 people shot beginning Friday afternoon. That includes a 14-year-old girl who is in critical condition. 12 other people died from their wounds. We're told the shootings are mostly gang-related. This says the number of murders in Chicago are up by 275 from the same time period last year. Whoa. That's according to the Chicago Police Department. This despite the fact that the Windy City has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. Yeah. But the police superintendent now saying Chicago needs even stricter gun laws.
While this is the sickening reality, it shows yet again that our penalties for carrying and using guns here in Chicago are just not an effective deterrent against repeat gun offenders. While we have promising leads, this unacceptable level of violence demonstrates the clear and present need for policymakers to convene in January and give Chicago the gun sentencing tools against repeat gun offenders so that we can begin to change this narrative.
Wow, it just makes you wonder, are they on the right message? I mean, how could they be talking about that when they already have the strictest gun laws in the country, Pete?
Guns, it's always because they reflexively go back to what they think they know and ignore. I think a lot of it does come down to a partisan lens that they refuse to look through. If you look at 80% of the drugs that are on the streets of Chicago that are driving that gang-related violence come from Mexican cartels.
Yep.
Yet they oppose, securing the border. Rahm Emanuel runs around talking about how his city is safe because it's a sanctuary city. So ideologically, they're obsessed with these sort of far left-wing policies that are ultimately fueling the violence in their very city. And then they don't have the backs of the cops who they asked to go into these dangerous neighborhoods, and they bow to the Black Lives Matter movement. So the combination of those two things, they run around and say, well, what else can we do? Try to grab more guns. Well, newsflash, criminals don't give up their guns because they know there's going to be a consequence either way. So it's just not going to work.
I know you may not want to hear this, but the reason there is drug violence in cities like Chicago is because drugs are illegal.
Well,
it creates a black market, and it creates criminal activity.
It's a fair argument.
They are fueled by these Mexican cartels that rely on prohibition in this country. We have gun prohibition, we have drug prohibition, and you see this insanely murderous cocktail that results in places like Chicago. People lawfully cannot defend themselves. People who are bad, who get guns illegally, are not going to pay attention to gun laws. If you are so motivated to take someone else's life, to murder them, you are not going to listen to a new set of stricter gun laws. Those do not apply to you. And if you know that the regular defenseless citizenry is unarmed, there is nothing stopping.
Yeah, new laws only apply to law-abiding citizens.
Right, but I actually think we need to take a step back here. He's not calling for more gun laws. He's calling for the justice. He's calling for the justice system to enforce the laws on the books. And the sentencing, you heard him say that the sentencing isn't a deterrent. You know why? Because they're letting these guys out of jail. He said the same thing a couple months ago when he said we're letting these guys, these repeat gun offenders, we're not forcing them to serve out their entire sentence, and therefore there's no deterrent. The outgoing Washington, D.C. police chief, Kathy Lanier, said the same exact thing before she left her post. We are not, the justice system is failing us, failing the police, failing our communities, because we have all the laws on the books. D.C. is just as strict when it comes to guns as Chicago, if not more, and these people are getting out of prison and going and doing the same thing.
But let's talk about
the justice system. It's not about the gun laws.
But let's talk about the crime wave across the country, Dagan, because it's not just Chicago. Chicago's obviously seeing this huge uptick, but homicides jumped in 16 of 20 of our major cities this year.
Right, and 37 out of 65 of the country's biggest police departments saw year-over-year homicide increases. I think that was through September, maybe. Part of it is the drug epidemic, the opioid problem, which again, that starts with prescription medications, quite frankly, in many instances. It's part of that, but it's not fighting the drug cartels. It's not enforcing our immigration laws, and it is not standing up for our police departments and behind and by and in front of our police officers. You have leaders in this country who stigmatize police forces across the nation.
Yeah,
of course. So where do you leave them?
When you throw your
leave
very
the citizens
cops,
at risk.
Yeah, when you throw your very cops under the bus, especially in the most violent neighborhoods, you leave those communities behind.
Exactly.
You make it worse for them.
And in places like
problem.
Chicago, Illinois has a huge union problem.
Yeah.
And because they've got so much money outgoing to these pensions of various public sector unions, oftentimes they can't afford enough cops.
Right.
All right. Well, it's becoming a trend on more and more college campuses these days. U.S. history no longer required for history majors.
Oh, good.
Yes, I just said that. But at a university named after the founding father, just how far will the PC police go?
This next story may have the father of our country turning in his grave like cotton candy in a machine. The College Fix reporting that history majors at George Washington University are no longer required to take classes in U.S. history. It's a new policy, the university says, will help students keep pace with a, quote, globalizing world. This is terrifying, this academic relativism, because it's as though in a medical school you wouldn't have to take any courses in medicine.
No, exactly.
Doesn't it seem a little insane?
Of course it is. I wish I would say it's silliness or insanity, but it is now the standard.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what is being taught across not just elite universities, but universities everywhere. It's why we get Bernie Sanders on the Democrat side, because you have a bunch of kids thinking they're global citizens that don't understand their own country, they don't understand capitalism, they don't understand the Constitution, so they're seduced by these utopian ideas.
Go Pete.
Also why we got Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because people are rejecting this nonsense. They love our country. Our history is worth knowing, and if you don't know it, you don't keep it. Yeah. So it drives me nuts, but people, we've lost.
And if you don't know it, you don't learn from it.
Exactly.
Well, not to repeat the bad stuff.
That is exactly right.
What drives me nuts is if I tell somebody under the age of 30 that I'm from the town that is the last home and burial place of Patrick Henry, they're like, what?
Who is Patrick? Who is Patrick
You know
Henry?
the Bill of Rights, you idiot. You know the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that give me... No, I can't.
Do you like your liberty?
Do you like your freedom?
Go get your degree in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
They're teaching you... It's like
That's a
getting to
really
know
good
yourself.
point, Megan. That's exactly what it is.
It's
so
BS in me.
solipsistic.
Yeah.
Well, I said it. Katie
said-
Pavlich,
I don't know what that means.
That's okay. Katie, you cover this beat. You know this world.
Yeah, I'm on college campuses a lot, and let me tell you, it's kind of crazy. But Pete said, you know, if you don't know it, you don't keep it.
Yeah.
That is exactly their goal. This is anti-American to take U.S. history out of history majors around the country, not just at George Washington University. I mean, we've seen around the country these campaigns to take down the American flag. We've seen these campaigns to take down the shield at Harvard because it represented slave owners who founded the school. I mean, they're erasing history because they don't want American history to thrive and to be part of our country. They're erasing it because it's anti-American, and that's exactly what they're going
Dare I ask you, like, what they're replacing this with? Like, what kind of classes
Marxism,
they're taking?
Socialism, communism. I mean,
Pumpkin carving.
If you go, right, pumpkin carving. I mean, they're replacing it with statism, no free choice. I mean, when they talk about...
They're whitewashing our history, making it so that we're doomed to make the same mistakes.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
That if you whitewash everything and everything is glitter and gold...
You're right, and it's all self-esteemism, too. It's exactly, you did get a degree in yourself, whether it's...
Yeah, but
it's also very immature.
Shouldn't you be confronted with some uncomfortable
Of
ideas?
course,
when
that's
you're
the
in
point of
college?
life.
Shouldn't you be studying systems that, you know, maybe there were worth to some and others were incredibly detrimental? That's like not studying World War II because you find Hitler offensive.
Right, exactly.
Yes, Professor Kennedy.
But they're creating a world that is just going to be soft and fluffy and luscious for everybody.
That's what it's
so
not.
There's no confrontation.
It's not. Baby lotion soft, and these people would not survive in the wild, I tell you. More outnumbered.
When I get...
Many thanks to Pete Hegseth for joining us, and always Katie Pavlich. Good to have you and Megan and Kenny. Everybody here. Fun show.
Fun show.
Thanks, Sandra.
What a day.
Big day.
Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year. We're staying right here for Outnumbered Overtime on the web. But by the way, we'll be back tomorrow. And find us on Facebook at facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. The fun continues online. Join us. We'll see you in a minute. We'll see you tomorrow. Happening now.